Have you ever found yourself chasing after something, believing it would bring you happiness, only to feel emptier once you get it? It's as if no matter how much you acquire, how many goals you reach, there's always something missing, something you just can't put your finger on. King Solomon, one of the wisest men who ever lived, knew exactly what that felt like. He had everything: wealth, power, fame, and pleasures beyond imagination. He threw lavish parties, built magnificent palaces, and lived in a world where his every desire could be satisfied at a whim. Yet, when he looked back at it all, after tasting every earthly joy, he declared, "Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless." Ecclesiastes 1:2. This wasn't a man defeated by life's struggles or a depressed poet lost in his thoughts. This was a king who had tasted every pleasure, and still, it all felt hollow. Solomon's story is more than a historical account. It's a warning, a call to stop chasing fleeting pleasures and instead seek a life filled with purpose and wisdom. So, why do we keep chasing the wind, as Solomon calls it? Why do we think the next promotion, the next party, or the next material possession will be the one that satisfies? Solomon's journey through life shows us a painful truth. Everything the world offers us is temporary, and it leaves us wanting more. But there is another way, a way that leads to real joy and lasting peace. Solomon didn't just tell us about the emptiness of worldly pleasures. He showed us the way to fill the void with something much deeper. Now, let me ask you, what are you chasing today? Is it something that brings you peace, or is it another quick fix, another momentary pleasure that will leave you feeling empty once it fades? Join me as we dive into the wisdom of Solomon and learn how we can live not just for fleeting pleasure, but for something far greater: purpose, peace, and lasting joy. Let's explore how to walk with God, even in the midst of temptation, and discover the true meaning that Solomon found after a lifetime of seeking everything the world had to offer. Have you ever had that moment when you're surrounded by everything you thought you wanted: success, wealth, friends, and yet something inside of you feels empty? You can't help but wonder, is this all there is? This longing for something more is not a new feeling. It's the same feeling that Solomon, the wise king of Israel, experienced in his own life. Solomon had it all. As a young king, he inherited a powerful kingdom from his father, David. He had riches beyond measure, palaces built with the finest materials, and the luxury of having whatever he wanted. Solomon could have anything he desired, from the finest foods to the most beautiful women. He partied with the best of them, indulging in every pleasure the world had to offer. Yet, in the end, he looked around and said something that would echo through the centuries. Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Ecclesiastes 1:1-2. Solomon's words are not the bitter lament of a man who had lost everything. No, they come from a man who had tasted every pleasure this world offers, and still he found himself longing for something more. He had experienced the highest highs, but they never lasted. He had explored every avenue for joy, but in the end, it all felt empty. When Solomon wrote about life being meaningless, he wasn't speaking from a place of despair, but from the realization that what the world calls joy is only a temporary illusion. He had chased after pleasure, fame, wealth, and everything society tells us we should pursue for happiness. And yet, these things never gave him the peace he was searching for. The more he gained, the less satisfied he became. The more he experienced, the emptier he felt. This is a truth we often forget in our modern world. We live in a culture that constantly tells us to seek happiness through external things. If you just had more money, more followers, more attention, more stuff, then you'd be happy. How many times have you thought that? How many times have you found yourself thinking, if only I could get this job, or travel to this place, or buy that new thing, I'll feel complete. But like Solomon, many of us find that no matter how many of those goals we reach, we still feel the same. The satisfaction fades. The joy is temporary, and then the cycle begins again. We keep chasing, hoping that the next thing will be the one that finally fills the emptiness we feel inside. But Solomon's life teaches us that true joy doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from more things, more attention, or more pleasure. True joy comes from purpose, finding a deeper connection with God and living in alignment with His plan for our lives. Think about it for a moment. When you chase something purely for the sake of pleasure, you may feel joy for a while. But once the newness fades, what do you have left? The excitement wears off, the high fades, and you're left searching for the next fix. But when you find purpose in your life, when you start living for something bigger than yourself, the joy you feel isn't fleeting. It's lasting. It's rooted in something deep, something eternal. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. What are you pursuing right now? Is it something that will give you temporary pleasure? Or is it something that aligns with a deeper sense of purpose? For example, consider the difference between living for fame and living for service. One can be fleeting and superficial, and the other can fill you with a sense of deep fulfillment. Think of someone who is famous for the sake of fame, constantly seeking validation from others. Despite their achievements, they never seem truly happy. But then think of someone who serves others selflessly, giving of themselves to help those in need. This person may not be recognized by the world, but their joy is not dependent on accolades. It comes from knowing they are fulfilling a purpose that is bigger than themselves. Solomon's wisdom offers us a powerful reminder. True joy is found when we live in alignment with God's purpose for our lives. This purpose is not about chasing pleasure. It's about living a life that reflects God's love and wisdom. When we live for purpose, we experience a joy that surpasses anything this world can offer. We are grounded in the knowledge that our lives have meaning, that we are part of a much bigger picture than just our own desires. Now you might be wondering, what does this look like in practice? How do we find that balance between living a life full of purpose while still enjoying the blessings and pleasures God has given us? The answer lies in the way Solomon approached life. He had everything the world could offer, yet he chose wisdom above all else. He asked God for a discerning heart, not for wealth or power, but for the ability to lead with wisdom. And God, in His grace, granted Solomon's request. Solomon understood that wisdom isn't about acquiring more things. It's about understanding what truly matters. This is the lesson we need to learn. The pleasures of this world are fleeting, but living a life rooted in God's wisdom and purpose brings lasting joy. We can enjoy the blessings God gives us, but we must remember that those blessings are not the source of our happiness. God is. Consider how often we try to fill the empty spaces in our lives with temporary pleasures, whether it's buying something new, binge-watching a show, or scrolling through social media. These things can give us momentary happiness, but they don't last. They don't satisfy the deeper longing in our hearts for purpose and meaning. But when we shift our focus, when we begin to live for God's purpose, that emptiness starts to fill. We begin to see joy in things that aren't based on pleasure alone. We find joy in serving others, in living with integrity, in pursuing wisdom, and in building relationships that reflect God's love. As Solomon discovered, true joy is found not in what we acquire, but in how we live our lives. It's about the choices we make every day to align our hearts with God's will. And the beauty of this is that, unlike the fleeting pleasures of this world, the joy that comes from living with purpose is everlasting. So the next time you find yourself searching for meaning, remember Solomon's journey. Remember that chasing after worldly pleasures will only leave you feeling empty. But living for God's purpose will fill you in a way nothing else can. Now let's move on to the next part of Solomon's story. How he taught us to choose wisdom over folly, and how the decision we make today can shape our tomorrow. Solomon's story is not just one of success and wisdom. It's also a story of choices, of two voices calling out to us every day. One voice, Lady Wisdom, leads to life. The other voice, Lady Folly, leads to regret. And the most sobering part of Solomon's tale is that despite his wisdom, he wasn't immune to the allure of folly. He walked both paths, and his experiences are a warning to us all. Every day we are faced with decisions, some small, some large, that are shaped by these two voices. Lady Wisdom calls us to live with integrity, to choose what is right even when it's hard. She offers us the path of self-control, discernment, and lasting joy. Lady Folly, on the other hand, whispers to us to take shortcuts, to ignore the consequences, and to live for the moment. She promises temporary pleasure but always leaves us empty in the end. This tension between wisdom and folly isn't just an ancient dilemma. It's a very real struggle we face today. Think about the decisions you make on a daily basis. How often do you choose instant gratification over long-term peace? How often do you settle for what's easy, what's comfortable, rather than doing the hard thing that will bring lasting fulfillment? Solomon's writings in Proverbs paint a vivid picture of these two voices. In Proverbs 1-9, he describes Lady Wisdom as a voice that cries out to the simple, to those who lack understanding. She offers a life of insight, favor, and blessings from God. She says, "Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord." Proverbs 8:34-35. Wisdom isn't just about knowing what's right. It's about living in a way that aligns with God's will, where our hearts are tuned to His guidance. On the flip side, Lady Folly is loud, seductive, and hard to resist. Solomon warns us that folly doesn't always look like what we think it would. It doesn't always come in the form of obvious sin or rebellion. Sometimes folly is disguised as convenience or comfort. In Proverbs 9:13-18, Lady Folly sits at the door of her house and invites the wandering to come in. She promises that stolen water is sweet and food eaten in secret is delicious. But Solomon warns that her guests are in the depths of hell. Folly's promises are empty. They lead to destruction. But the most dangerous thing about Lady Folly is how attractive her voice can be. She doesn't seem dangerous at first. She seems fun, liberating even, like the culture around us that tells us to live for the moment or do whatever feels good. In our world today, Lady Folly has become even more enticing. We live in an age where social media floods our feeds with messages of instant gratification, status, and fleeting pleasures. We are told to chase likes, followers, and attention, to seek fulfillment in things that never truly satisfy. It's a dangerous game because we often don't realize we're being led astray until it's too late. The way of folly is rarely immediate destruction. It's often a slow, quiet drift that leads us farther from the life we were meant to live. So, how do we discern which voice we're listening to? How do we know when we're following the path of wisdom or being led down the slippery slope of folly? The first step is awareness. We must recognize the subtle ways folly can appear in our lives. It might not look like obvious rebellion. It could be the temptation to compromise in small things, or to take the easy way out in situations where we know we should stand firm in our values. It's in the moments when we choose to numb ourselves with distractions, when we prioritize comfort over growth, when we avoid hard conversations or responsibilities because they feel too difficult. The second step is to make intentional choices that align with wisdom. Solomon teaches us that wisdom is a decision. It's not just about having knowledge, it's about applying that knowledge to our lives. Choosing wisdom means seeking God's guidance in every area of our lives. It means choosing the hard thing when it's right, even when it costs us. It means living a life of integrity, of humility, and of obedience to God. As Solomon wrote in Proverbs 3:5-6, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Wisdom begins with trust. Trust that God's way is better than our own. Trust that he sees the bigger picture, and trust that his plan is filled with purpose and peace. But there's also something deeply personal about Solomon's warnings. He didn't just teach wisdom, he lived it. And he also lived the consequences of choosing folly. As the wisest man who ever lived, Solomon fell prey to his own desires. In the latter part of his life, he allowed his heart to be turned by his many foreign wives, who led him into idolatry and disobedience to God. Solomon's story isn't just a theoretical one, it's a personal one. He walked both paths. He lived with wisdom, but he also let folly creep into his life. The regret and pain he experienced are recorded in Ecclesiastes, where he confesses that despite his wisdom, he allowed his heart to drift from God. This part of Solomon's story is a sobering reminder for us. It's not enough to know what's right. We must continue to choose it every day. Folly doesn't usually come with a big, dramatic decision. It starts with small compromises, with choosing comfort or temporary pleasure over long-term peace and purpose. It starts with letting our guard down, allowing our priorities to shift, and slowly drifting away from the wisdom we once knew. But Solomon's fall doesn't have to be our fall. His story doesn't have to end in regret if we make the decision now to choose wisdom, every day, in every moment. So, which voice are you listening to? The voice of wisdom that leads to life, or the voice of folly that leads to regret? The beauty of Solomon's wisdom is that it's available to all of us, no matter where we are in life. God invites us to ask for wisdom, to seek it above all else, and he promises to give it generously, James 1:5. But we must choose it. We must make the decision to walk the path that leads to life, to listen to the voice that points us to God's truth, and to turn away from the distractions that lead us astray. As we continue to explore Solomon's wisdom, we'll see how his teachings can guide us through the complexities of life, helping us navigate our relationships, our work, and our choices with clarity and purpose. But first, we must decide which voice we will listen to. Will we choose wisdom, or will we follow folly? The choice is ours. Solomon's life stands as a powerful testament to the truth that wisdom isn't just about acquiring knowledge, it's about making the right choices. His story is filled with moments of incredible clarity, where he sought God's guidance and chose the path of wisdom. Yet it also holds the painful reality that even the wisest among us can drift away from the very wisdom we've once embraced. In 1 Kings 11, Solomon's story takes a sobering turn. Despite having been given more wisdom than anyone else, he allowed small compromises to lead him astray. Solomon's downfall didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic fall. It began with something subtle, a shift in his heart. Solomon's many foreign wives, whom he had married in accordance with political alliances, eventually led him to worship other gods. And as his heart turned towards idols, his wisdom was clouded, and his relationship with God began to deteriorate. Solomon's failure to protect his heart is one of the greatest warnings for us today. It shows that no matter how much wisdom we have, no matter how strong our faith might seem at a given moment, we are always susceptible to spiritual drift. The danger lies in the slow, imperceptible erosion of our relationship with God. It's the small choices we make each day, the choices that seem harmless at first, that can lead us down a path of spiritual complacency. Solomon didn't wake up one day and decide to abandon God. He let his priorities shift, slowly letting other things take the place of God in his heart. This is where Solomon's story becomes intensely personal for us. How many of us are guilty of allowing small compromises to creep into our lives? How many of us have let distractions, relationships, or comforts take precedence over our relationship with God? It can be as simple as allowing the pull of busyness to prevent us from spending time in prayer, or allowing the desire for recognition to drive our decisions. These small compromises, when repeated over time, lead to a gradual but profound drift from the wisdom and peace that comes from living in alignment with God's will. But here's the truth that Solomon's life teaches us. It's never too late to return to God. Even after Solomon's many mistakes, God still used his wisdom to impact generations to come. The book of Ecclesiastes, which Solomon wrote later in his life, reveals a man who had tasted everything the world had to offer, wealth, power, pleasure, and found it all to be meaningless without God. In Ecclesiastes 12:13, Solomon concludes, "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." This is not just the conclusion of a man who had lost everything. It's the profound realization of a man who had lived both paths, the path of wisdom and the path of folly, and found that wisdom alone, in reverence to God, is the only way to true fulfillment. So, what do we do with this? How do we avoid the same pitfalls that Solomon faced? First, we must recognize the subtle signs of drift. Just as Solomon didn't fall into sin all at once, neither will we. It begins with small, seemingly insignificant choices. We must constantly examine our hearts and ensure that we are not letting anything, be it a relationship, a career, or even our own desires, take the place of God in our lives. As Solomon himself wrote in Proverbs 4:23, "Above all else guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." If we want to stay aligned with God's wisdom, we must keep our hearts anchored in Him. Second, we must make intentional decisions to stay close to God, even in the midst of distractions. Solomon's wisdom wasn't just about knowledge, it was about the posture of his heart. We too must adopt the same posture, one of humility, surrender, and dependence on God. If we want to avoid the drift, we must remain rooted in God's word, prioritize prayer, and seek His guidance in every area of our lives. Solomon asked for wisdom because he understood that it was only through God's wisdom that he could lead well. We too must ask for wisdom daily, wisdom to discern God's will and to stay true to His purpose for our lives. Finally, we must be aware that wisdom is not just for the big decisions in life. It's for the small, everyday choices that shape the direction of our lives. The way we choose to spend our time, the way we treat others, the way we manage our resources, all of these choices matter. They may seem small in the moment, but over time, they accumulate and shape our character and our destiny. Just as Solomon's life was shaped by the choices he made, so too will our lives be shaped by our decisions. And the best way to ensure that those decisions lead us to a life of purpose and joy is by choosing wisdom. Solomon's story doesn't end in regret. It ends in a call to action, a call to return to God and choose wisdom over folly. His life is both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. If Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, can fall, then we must be vigilant in guarding our hearts and seeking wisdom. But just as Solomon found his way back to God, so can we. It's never too late to choose wisdom, to return to God, and to live a life that is aligned with His purpose. So, as we reflect on Solomon's journey, let's ask ourselves, where are we in our own journey? Are we listening to the voice of wisdom, or are we being pulled by the voice of folly? Are we guarding our hearts, or are we letting the small compromises of life lead us away from God? Let Solomon's life be a reminder that the path of wisdom is not always the easiest, but it is always the best. And as we continue our journey through Solomon's wisdom, we'll see how this path can transform every area of our lives, from our relationships to our work, our finances, and even our inner thoughts. Let's choose wisdom, not just for today, but for a lifetime. As we close today's journey through Solomon's wisdom, let's pause for a moment and reflect on all that we've learned. Here we are, living in a world that constantly pulls us in 1,000 different directions, towards instant gratification, superficial success, and temporary pleasures. Yet deep down, we all know that something is missing, something that can never truly be filled by what the world has to offer. Solomon knew this too, and his life, filled with unimaginable wealth, wisdom, and power, proves that chasing after the things of this world will always leave us wanting more. Solomon's wisdom isn't just for the kings and queens of ancient Israel. It's for us today. His reflections on life, purpose, and meaning echo across centuries and speak to the core of our existence. If we're being honest, it's easy to get lost in the noise of our world. The distractions are everywhere: social media, work pressures, the constant pursuit of the next big thing. It's so easy to find ourselves chasing after the wrong things. We get caught up in the race for success, the pursuit of status, or the desire for things that promise happiness but never quite deliver. And just like Solomon, we end up feeling empty. It's in those moments of emptiness that Solomon's voice rings loud and clear, reminding us that true joy, true peace, true meaning only come when we choose to align our lives with something greater than ourselves. It's not about more. It's about deeper. It's about a life that finds purpose not in possessions or fleeting pleasures, but in a relationship with the Creator who knows our hearts better than we know ourselves. You may be wondering, how do I start living this way? How do I stop chasing the wind and start living with purpose? The good news is that the answer is simple, even if it's not always easy. It starts with a decision. It starts with choosing wisdom over folly, choosing God's path over our own, and choosing a life of purpose over one of distraction. Solomon's wisdom was rooted in the fear of the Lord, a reverence for God that guided his every decision, his every word, and his every action. It wasn't about perfect living. It was about an honest, humble walk with God, seeking His guidance, listening for His voice, and living each day with intention. I know that many of you are watching this and feeling a stirring in your heart. Maybe you're tired of running after the things that don't satisfy. Maybe you're ready to take that first step towards a deeper, more meaningful life. The truth is, it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, whether you've been walking with God for years or whether you've just begun to explore His wisdom. It's never too late to start living in alignment with His purpose. Every day is a new opportunity to choose a better path. Solomon's story is not just about a man who had it all and lost it. It's also about a man who found his way back, a man who realized that the only thing worth chasing in this life is God's wisdom. And that wisdom is available to all of us right now if we choose to seek it. The journey won't always be easy. In fact, it's going to require courage, commitment, and sometimes sacrifices. But the beauty of living with purpose, of living in line with God's wisdom, is that the rewards are not temporary. They are eternal. The peace you find, the joy that fills your heart, the sense of purpose you experience, they will last far longer than any fleeting pleasure this world offers. And here's the kicker. As you walk this path, you'll begin to realize that the things you once thought were important, the praise, the validation, the material success, become secondary. You'll find that the love and purpose you seek were always there, waiting for you to turn toward them. So, as we end this video, I want to encourage you. Don't let today's message be just another video you watch and forget. Let it be the beginning of something new in your life. If you've been chasing after things that leave you feeling empty, it's time to stop. It's time to start listening to the voice of wisdom that's been calling you all along. It's time to choose a life of purpose over a life of pleasure. You don't need to have it all figured out right now. None of us do. But you do need to take that first step, and I believe you're ready for it. If this video has impacted you in any way, I'd love for you to show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. When you do, you'll be joining a community of people who are committed to living deeper, more purposeful lives. We're in this together, and I can't wait to continue this journey with you. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it, and let's spread this message of wisdom and purpose to as many people as possible. Before we go, let's take a moment and reflect on what we've learned. God's wisdom is available to us all, and it's up to us to choose it. If you're feeling lost, if you're feeling empty, know that there is more to life than what you see on the surface. True joy is found when we live in alignment with God's will, and that's the kind of joy that doesn't fade away. I encourage you to take that step, to listen for the voice of wisdom, and to choose purpose over pleasure every day. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad you're here, and I look forward to walking this path of wisdom and purpose with you. Until next time, stay faithful, stay wise, and most of all, stay close to God. Your best days are ahead, and they begin right now.